it's time for our February One Stitch at a Time Club design, and it is this little bird and nest, and the mom has a cherry, but hers is shaped like a heart since it's Valentine's Day. So as you can tell, I did some drawing on here that I've kind of changed my mind on, and as I've said in other videos, I do change things up as I'm stitching the first one, and the design that you will get will have where the actual stitches go, and they won't show these other little messes. So we have a few different stitches. One is the stem stitch. I have that in almost all of my designs. So I'm going to bring the needle up at one end, and since this is a curve to the side, to the outside, I'm going to carry my thread to the outside. I'm going to start with 1/8 of an inch and then go back 1/16 of an inch. And that's the first stitch. Now I'm going to take that 1/8 of an inch and I'm going to come up in the same hole that my last stitch ended in. So we're going to continue to do that, just small stitches, and come up right in that same hole. And this is how I like to do the stem stitch. So I'll go to the end and I'll show you how I like to make the little point on the leaf. So now I've come to the end of my leaf and I want to make a nice little sharp point. So what I tend to do is I just take the thread or the needle just a few threads past the tip of where the drawing ended, and I'm going to come back up in that same hole just like before, only it's just a tiny little stitch. Now I'm going to turn my fabric and go back on the other side, and that has created a nice little point on the end. You can see it on this one pretty well, how it sticks out just a little bit farther. And a lot of times leaves in nature do that, so I thought it worked perfectly for leaves. Now the next stitch I'm going to show is the fern stitch, and that is the veins that go inside of the leaves. To do the fern stitch, we're going to start at the tip of the leaf, and we're going to bring the needle down the center vein and then angle it out to one side. Now we bring the needle down at the base of that first stitch and angle it out to the other side. This side's pretty short, but that's okay. And you bring the needle down back again into that center one. And we're going to take the needle now and go down the stem. And we're ready to start that process over again. So we're going to go to the beginning of this previous one, out to the angle, back to the center bottom, out to at an angle, back to the center, go down the center of the spine, and you just continue on like that. And that's called a fern stitch. I think it makes a nice little vein, a fake vein. Like that. The other part of the design where I'll be using that same green thread is this stem on the cherry, but I'm going to do it after I finish stitching the red heart so that the stem can come down on, you can see it. I thought it'd be kind of fun to fill this heart-shaped cherry in with a stem stitch. So I've done the outline, and you always want to start with the outline when you're filling things in. And I'm just going to continue to go around the edge all the way into the center. I'm going to carry my thread towards the line of stitches I've already have, so that when they fall in a little bit, it will close any gap between those two rows. And I'm going to stitch it right up against that first row. And this is again just the stem stitch. And using this variegated thread, I think it will kind of make it look like a pretty variegated red heart. Now, when I get to this point where I'm turning the corner, I might just put my needle not right in that exact same hole as it was, just next to it so that I can kind of start going at a different angle. And, you know, sometimes I have a little knot there, I think. I'm trying to not stitch through. Sometimes when I'm going around a curve like this, the threads tend to fall in, or I might have a little bit of a gap that I don't like. And I noticed that, like right here, I can see some of the fabric. I don't know if anybody else would notice, but if you want, and it's not kosher, you're not gonna win any prizes by doing this, but I have no problem with just tacking my threads in place to hold them in place. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm going to get it stitched back up to this part that's kind of bugging me. And I could wait till I'm all the way done because it will probably be several places. Okay, so I'm going to put my needle down, and then I'm going to come over here where I can see some of that fabric through there, and I don't like that. So I'm going to add a stitch, just like that. And I can also, if I want, kind of redirect a stitch. So maybe take my needle up on the outside of that thread from a stitch and take it down on the other side, kind of pulling it into place where I want it. And that is cheating, and that's how I like to stitch. So I'll finish up this heart. So here's the little cherry, heart-shaped cherry, all filled in with a stem stitch. I think it turned out really cute. I like that. I'm glad I did it. And then I did a green stem and came down over the top of it just a little bit. In the bird's wings and tail, I did these fly stitches, which are really simple. What you're going to do is take your needle up at the beginning of the little loop, come up on the, put your needle down on the other side, and the point of the needle is going to go where the point of the leaf is. You see how that's shaped like these leaves. And you carry your thread under the needle, pull it away from you, pull it towards the point, your thread, and then all you have to do is take the needle down right on the other side of that thread to tack it in place. And then you have a fly stitch, and that's what these little stitches are. The other thing I did is I used a lot of seed stitch and little straight stitches. So just by adding these little straight stitches, it kind of gives it a little bit of a barky feel. And in the nest, I did them real randomly inside the nest, but in the eggs, I went around more of a circle with the little running stitches. And then the last thing I wanted to show you here for the eye, what I like to do is take a couple of small stitches, and this will be drawn on your pattern. I'm just eyeballing it here, but you just take one little stitch at kind of an angle like that, and then you're going to take another little stitch like that, and that kind of creates his little eye there. So those are just two very tiny little stitches. You could do a French knot if you want. I might add a few more little stitches just around his head for some depth. But other than that, this one is done. I know I've been doing a lot of coloring in lately on these designs to show you a different option. But this month I decided to do something a little bit different. I took the pattern and I reduced it. I'm kind of into little things these days. So this is the same pattern at 50%. And I am filling in just with stem stitches, satin stitch. This is a fly stitch that I made for the leaf. and then a bunch of seed stitches for the nest. And I don't know if you can tell there, after I did the satin stitch and the blue eggs, I went back and I added just these little tiny specks of black. So since it's so small, I know I don't normally use a hoop, but a hoop is very helpful when you're working with small pieces like this if you're doing filled in areas like the cherries and the leaves. Those I would suggest using a hoop. I think it's really helpful. So for the cherries, I'll show you on this little guy. We're going to start on one end. And I have to tell you, I bought myself a magnifying lamp. And I'm not using it right now, but it has been so helpful. It has this light on it. Let me turn this light off so you can see the difference it makes. It has a light and then a 5-inch magnifying thing that you look through, and you can kind of bend it so that it's in the right position for you, and it has made a world of difference with stitching. So I'm going to attempt this without that. We're just going to take a small stitch to start, and then you bring the needle up really close to where you began on that line, the opposite line. And that's the first stitch. Now we're going to come down, so we're going to stay very close to that first one, but we're just going to follow the line around in the circle. Now, one thing sometimes I do is I'll go ahead and fill these in with a red marker, and that way it looks better, even if my stitches aren't better. And this is the Valdani Old Brick. I love this color. I love the variegation. So there's a little space there. You can see the difference between the two colors. This is the same thread, but just a different part of the thread. So I think that's pretty cool. So my stitches aren't lining up too much, but I'm going to kind of push this guy over. And as you can tell, I'm not a type A personality. I'm not a perfectionist. So I'm sorry if this is driving you nuts if you are a perfectionist. But more so, I just want to show you that, you know, this is all for fun. It's supposed to be something that you enjoy doing. That's my hope anyway. That's why I do it, and not to stress out. So the trick with satin stitch is to just take it very slow and actually to have really good lighting, and the magnifier really helps if you're working on small things like this. Because this cherry's turning out okay, but not the best. But that's all right. And I'm doing the cherries before I do the stems because I do want the stems to come down on top of the cherries just a tiny bit like they did in this heart. And you can see this heart, I did use my magnifying glass lamp with the light, and it turned out much better. So that's how to do a satin stitch, and we'll do that over the egg too. Now the leaves are done using a fly stitch, a very closely put together fly stitch. And I kind of like the look because it gives it this little vein down the center. So to begin, you start at the very tip of your leaf. Bring the needle straight down the center, not very far, maybe a little bit bigger than 1/8 of an inch. And then you're going to come up on one side of the point where you started, right on the line. Now you carry your thread down, and you're going to put the needle on the other side of that leaf and bring your needle up at the base of that very first stitch. Carry the thread under the needle so it's catched, and put the needle down right on the other side of the thread to hold it in place. So they're just basically fly stitches, but they're very close together. And each one is going to get a little bit bigger as it goes down the leaf. Actually, I probably could have done this without a hoop, but... So it looks like it's kind of a difficult stitch. I love the way it fills it in, but it's actually super easy. So hopefully you'll give it a try. if you're doing a big leaf, like on this one, it probably wouldn't work too well because it's so big. It might, but I'd probably use a thicker thread too. But with just this 12 weight Valdani, I think for these small leaves, it's perfect. Okay, I'll finish this leaf and then I'll show you how I do the filled in areas. With a stem stitch, you want to do what I suggested on this heart, where you go around the outside first and then work your way in. For this bird, I thought it would be fun to do certain areas filled in. So the wing, and at the tip of the wing, I did some satin stitches like to indicate where that tip is. And then for the tail, just row, 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 row straight this way, not around in a circle. And the other thing I wanted to make sure of was that I could tell where this wing was, the difference between the wing and the body. And so since this is really pretty variegated thread, I was able to do that just with the thread. So I picked out the lighter part of the thread to do on this edge of the wing. And for the body, I'm taking the darker thread. I'm going to carry the thread so that it's coming against this wing because I want the thread to kind of fall in to hide any fabric underneath. And since this is going to be pretty dark, I'm not even going to put an eye on this little guy. And even though this is a different color, the wing is still going to kind of blend in a little bit, and that's okay. This is just an idea if it's something that you want to try. Just know that on these designs, you're more than welcome to change the size of them. You know, make them your own. I'm going to go around his head. I'm going to take tiny, tiny stitches. So that is February's design. And I hope you really have fun stitching these up, and I am encouraging you to try different sizes. I'm going to go ahead and send this 50% one also. So